I don't think these folks need any introduction, but we have Jim Hines and Mary Pat Happ here today who are going to take you on a little very informal tour of London. We have some nice treats over here, London British treats for you to enjoy. And who takes the mic first?
I do.
You do. Jim Hines. All right.
I'm done.
Enjoy, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I talked to the cable guy and we a little light. Yeah, here we go. A little light have his camera work. So I think we have to leave it like this. This is not working, so I'm going to grab it.
Okay.
I don't know why not.
When you walk around sometimes, is it the other box?
It's that one. It should work.
Yeah.
All right, let's try this. That better? Yep. Over Christmas, my travel agent, Mary Pat, and I'm lucky to have a travel agent built into the house. We went to the great city of London for Christmas, the week before Christmas, and came home the day afterwards. So you may have seen a slideshow tour of England. No, this is going to be strictly London because that's what we did. And she put together a great itinerary for us to cover the city, although we didn't cover the city. There was lots left to do. So I'm told, coming up not so long in the future, there'll be another trip. So stand by for another coffee and conversation, I guess, at some point. So we're calling this the Mind the Gap Tour. Anybody know why? There's a man in the back. You have an Oyster card. Okay. This is a phrase you hear on every subway stop, which they call the tube, of course, over there. Mind the gap between the car and the platform. So it's sort of a British-centric saying. I think of it that way anyway. So you can see why.
Yeah. Some of them were quite big.
Many of the cars don't line up horizontally, or there's a gap of 8 inches there that you could fall through. So at every announcement for every station, mind the gap, please. So that's what we're calling this thing. I meant to start by saying I can't imagine why anyone would want to get together and watch someone else's vacation pictures. So thanks for doing that. Sometimes that can be the most boring thing. We'll try not to make it that way for you. This all occurred, if you remember, right when Southwest Airlines was stranding people all over the nation for days, some of them, and we skated through. We got scared. British Airways canceled the flight 2 days before our trip, and the flight the day before our trip. The same flight goes every day.
And the flight the day after.
And that's right, and the day afterwards. So our blood pressure was up pretty high, but we made it. Almost. Almost. We almost made it. No, we made it on time. That is one of our 3. That's Picasso. And Picasso didn't want us to go, obviously. Or he wanted to go too. Coincidentally, just before that, there was literally a cat found in someone's checked baggage. Remember that story? Well, Picasso didn't get the memo. Yes? That's my suitcase, and he's not letting me load it without him. So we have 2 other cats, Boots and Goose. No pictures, but we're very lucky to be able to go on the trip because many of you here know Billy, my coworker here, Billy. Billy came every morning and cat sat for us every morning for 10 days. And even Jill, many of you know Jill, and her 2 kids found out about kitties, and they came several times and just visited with the cats. So we were lucky to have not too much worry about the cat situation at home, which sometimes is a situation at home. Other people wondered how we got to the airport and suggested limo services, but this is how we did it. We did it with Logan Express. Round trip, the whole thing for Logan Express going in and out was $107.
Including the parking.
Including the parking. We looked at limo services which are up over $200 each way. So each way, right. So we had to get up at 3 a.m. and get down there. I think we took the 4:30 bus in because the plane left at 6:30. They actually told us we should be there 3 hours ahead of takeoff, but we didn't. We aimed for 2, and it was fine. This was British Airways. So we recommend the bus from Braintree for anybody. Part of this talk will be about the ways you guys can do this trip and make it easier on you knowing what we did. There it is. Mary Pat will talk about this later, but that's an electronic boarding pass. You hardly ever get paper anymore. In fact, all through the trip, phones are almost essential to have. Everything is electronic now. So there it is, the big Boeing 787.
Did you jump out and take a picture?
I'm a private pilot. I got a pass to the airport. I just stood out at the end of the runway, Joe. So we're going. Here we go. We're at 41,000 feet, and we're heading over Newfoundland, Labrador. And Mary Pat looked over at the seat. This is the TV on the seat in front of me, and there's Hines Lake.
Right.
We're passing over there. And I thought that was too good not to take a picture of there. Never heard of it before. I doubt they're related to me. And so the trip was British Air to Heathrow Airport, and our plan was to take the tube. Our first experience was going to be on the tube, taking the subway to the Hammersmith section of London, which is on the west side of the city. This is cheating. This is when we left to go home, but this will give you an idea what it looks like. Then out of the train station, a 10-minute walk to our hotel. We found this tremendous, small, 17-room hotel to stay in. And there it is. Yeah, it's kind of classic British, isn't it? I think it's lived its whole life as a hotel. It's the Brook Green Hotel. And just off to the right, actually across the street, is the Brook Green. It's named for the Brook Green. It's green space. And why don't you go point to where our room was?
We reserved late. I think this was us up.
And there's no elevator. So we walked in the front door there, and we knew that's ahead, but there was a lovely situation because 17 kind of private rooms, not a big conglomeration of hotel rooms, and a pub in the bottom floor there. So everything we needed right there, except an elevator. And the staff was stunned when we said, no, we'll carry our bags upstairs. And we did, and there was a lot of stairs. We only had to carry the bags up once, so that made it. So. There's the bar. So it's sort of classic British pub, but it's right in the first floor of our hotel. And it's popular with other people from the neighborhood and probably from around the city, I would think. Very nice. Has a great gin section in the bar there. So it's The logo is Brook Green. It's a BGH up there. So well done. And we were home before we even started. And there we are with our celebratory "We Made It" drink. And that white piece of paper there is a gift certificate. Since it was Christmas time, I have a very generous staff behind me out there. And somebody out there had called ahead to the Brook Green Hotel and put, let's say, money on account for us. And so we were able to have our initial libation on you guys. On Carrie and Debbie, actually. Thank you. Your turn.
Okay.
Tag team.
Okay, tag team it. So we want to just start off by saying, as you watch through this, if this appeals to you, this is actually not a difficult trip. And we planned this only about 2 months before we went, maybe 6 weeks. It was a little bit spur of the moment. But you know why I think this is kind of easy to do, of course, English being the primary language, although I will say it was amazing how many different nationalities and languages you hear in London. It's really, I mean, it's the entire British Empire is represented in London, really. But always you can, English is a common language, but the flight is only 6 or 7 hours, 6 hours going over and 7 coming back, which is really no different than going to California. It's except the other direction. So it's, Jim mentioned we never got out of London on this trip, and you do not need to rent a car. You don't need to drive on the wrong side of the road. We spent we did some walking, but we were on public transit all the time, and I'll talk about that again a little bit later. It's really amazing, the public transit system, and so easy to navigate. I feel it was easier than Boston. Even living in Boston, I feel like it was easier to get around London. But cabs were also all over the place, and they do have Uber over there too. So it was very easy to get around. The climate is more moderate. So, going at Christmas time, we thought, should you go in the winter? But it is about 10 degrees warmer there in general, and about 10 degrees cooler in the summer. So it's just, it was, warm enough that we were out walking comfortably all the time. And we even we'll show you, but we went bike riding one day. So it was, it was definitely easy to be outside a lot. And the one thing is that they are further north than we are, and so the days are shorter. And it was noticeable. I think it didn't get light until 8 a.m., I would say. And by 4, it was dark. So it's a short day. Of course, if you go in the summer, you get a long day. And lastly, that our credit cards, credit cards are just seamless anymore. I think the only thing that we realized that was worth to pay attention to is that some banks or some institutions charge a foreign transaction fee to change from their British pounds now. They got off the euro, Brexit. It's back to a British pound. And actually, we should have brought some of that. I don't think we have any money that we brought home. The paper money is all new, and it's plastic. It's plastic. It's amazing. Yeah, it's a very thin sheet of plastic, and sometimes it's clear, and they have holograms on them. And each denomination's a different size. It's really clever. I mean, if you had to start all over with cash, which is essentially what they did, that's what they chose to do. But really, credit card. We used our credit cards freely. It's no big deal. There were 2 websites that I put in there that were especially helpful. So I'm happy to share that with anybody. VisitLondon.com and thelondontoolkit.com. So.
I went to Bank of America, got cash before we left.
Yeah.
And you get £1 for $1.20.
Yeah, you can order. Yeah, we went over with British pounds, so we didn't have to worry about doing that on the trip. So we have a couple different we're going to show you like a couple different days that we did over there. And the first is sort of the biggest, probably the biggest tourist attraction in London, seen here from its cloister. Anybody has a guess? There's another view of it from this side through the cloister. Westminster Abbey. Yep. So we did not see the royal wedding, but if you saw the royal wedding, if you were watching that on television, you already did see a lot of the interior of Westminster Abbey. And I guess the most recent, so many big events have happened there, and the most recent one was Queen Elizabeth's funeral, I think, was in Westminster Abbey. The Abbey itself, so this was one of our must-dos to go to Westminster Abbey. The building itself dates back, parts of it, about 1,000 years. And but I think what surprised us the most is that, I always think of this as an old building that they built a long time ago. They are still adding on to this building. So this is the front of the building, and you can see the two towers, and the main door is down under here. There's a set of 10 statues set back in these little recesses here, and they were just unveiled in 1998. Those are 20th century Christian martyrs. And there is actually, we have one person from the US that's represented there. I don't know if anybody would have a guess as to who that might be, considered a Christian martyr. So Martin Luther King is represented right in the center. He's one of the statues on Westminster Abbey. Yeah. So, so the Abbey itself, so it started out as a Benedictine cloister. This is going in the front door and turning around and looking behind you at the stained glass. Of course, the stained glass in here is just amazing. And not all of the building is 1,000 years old, but it's now actually non-denominational, and it's not under the auspices of any particular religion. It's actually under the auspices of the British Crown, which is the only church that I think is that way. And so every hour they did chime a chime, and you had to have a quiet time for prayer and reflection. So it's still very much a religious building, and even though it's used for a lot of state-type ceremonies. So this is inside, walking further in the building towards the choir. The choir is a section in the middle, not like our choir loft, but where their choir sits. It's just a slightly different arrangement of a church, and these are the pipes of the organ right here. We're only about midway into the church at this point, or the abbey, and this is just a little bit of the close-up detail. It's just hard to imagine until you see it close up, the ornate and the brilliance of it and the ornateness of it. This is looking over the entrance to the choir, and this is just sort of the door to the choir is right below here. It's just really dazzling in person, and once you walk through that doorway, you walk down the aisle, and it's lined with pews, essentially, or benches. And that's what we're looking down the aisle towards the altar. And all of these have their own little candle on them. And this is where the choir sits. And those candles are so the choir members can read their choir books. And it's actually a little bit, maybe a little more, but you can see the ornate the carving again behind the benches that sort of surrounds this. Back to that wedding. This is sort of a shot from the wedding that you see the bride and groom coming down the aisle here, and they are walking through the choir. This is a shot you really cannot get when you're the tourist, right? But you can see the choir members sitting in these long rows of benches. And some of the more important guests were sitting in the choir, and so it was really kind of a thrill that we were able to sit right in the choir. We took a guided tour there. It was one of the vicars of the church, I think it is, that give the tours, and this guy was really tremendous. In fact, we learned we're going to see him on television at the coronation because he's involved in the coronation ceremonies, and so we were actually sitting right in the choir where all those wedding guests were sitting. So it was kind of really a neat experience. And if we look a little bit further ahead, this is the altar, the main altar of the Westminster Abbey. And I'll point out, although maybe you can see it, every place needs to be cleaned because this woman is vacuuming with a backpack vacuum. So couldn't get kind of a really clean shot, but yeah, that's so. This is the main altar. It's about in the middle of the church, and if you look here, we go back to the wedding. This is where everybody. This is sort of where everything happens in that space right in front of the altar there. When there's a big event at the Abbey. And so here's kind of more of a close-up. And I know it's hard to tell, and we're happy to share any of these, but the close-up of this is really, that's so stunning. It's just so, all the gilt, and the mosaics, and the floors are all mosaics. It's just, the art in here is just really stunning. Does anybody have a guess what that is? It's the coronation throne, and I think it does date back to him. Yes, it's every king of England has been crowned on this throne since 1066. So for the last 1,000 years, and they still use it. They still drag this old wooden chair, and it does look like an old wooden chair in person. And in fact, so this will be the next big event at Westminster is the coronation in May, the first week of May. Yep. And they'll pull that out to the front of the Abbey. So in addition, so there's the other thing that Westminster I think is probably pretty well known for is that there's so many people buried there under the floor. 3,300, over 3,300 people are buried there. Apparently they have a map. Yeah.
And you walk on them.
And you walk on them. Yeah. Some of them are ashes, but I think some of them there's a lot of sarcophagi in there, but there's also just a lot of stones and a lot of unmarked people's graves there too, and in the walls of the cloister and so forth. But if you're anybody that's sort of relatively famous in England is offered a burial in Westminster, and so we had Edward Elgar. Now, some of them, Elgar is not actually buried there, I learned, but some people are just commemorated there. But Ralph Vaughan Williams and Charles Stanford, we're musicians. We've always got the eye out for the musicians. This is a life-size statue, again, in the Abbey, because he's buried there, of Handel. And he's holding a score to the Messiah as part of that sculpture, but he is also buried there. And there's his tombstone. You can see they get relettered and occasionally replaced, but largely they're the original stones in the floor. And right next to him, Charles Dickens, Rudyard Kipling, Thomas Hardy. It's really, it's a who's who in British history. So you could spend 3 days in here with all the different side chapels. This was our favorite of the side chapels. This is actually considered a side chapel. This is up at the top end. If a abbey typically looks like a cross, this chapel is sort of way up over the head. It's called the Ladies' Chapel, and it was added in 1500. And the ceiling of this is just stunning. It's sort of a half oval. And it's not quite, it's a little bit longer than an oval, but you can see here it's just magnificent. The flags are the Order of Bath, which is a military service order. So those are family flags of people who currently have been designated as a member of that order. These windows, this is another example of recent additions to the Abbey. So these blue and white windows were just added for Queen Elizabeth's Diamond Jubilee, which was only a few years ago. The window in the back, the multicolored, was for the millennium. So year 2000, that one was installed and dedicated. So there's still spaces in there too where there are just plain glass windows. But I don't know if that's what they replaced here or not. But again, it was kind of surprising. They're always adding more to this incredible monument. There's another shot of the ceiling. You just can't imagine how they did that.
It is not painted. That's three-dimensional plaster casts that are somehow
Yeah.
attached and haven't fallen in hundreds of years. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
It's
and the bombings.
and that's a great point too. That the abbey itself was never significantly damaged in the bombing in all the bombings in 1940 and 41. It's another shot of the ceiling from a little further back. This was like what? Yeah, it had to be 4 stories high.
Oh yeah, more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And let's see, how are we doing? Oh, geez. I'll go quick through the next couple. The bad thing about the Lady Chapel is these are the seats. These are the
Really?
seats. And we realized, I think they're meant for you to stand against more than to sit on. Because this folds down and that is your seat. And there is not much to sit on there. So, but those are also quite old and pretty graffitied up. This place has been open to the public for a long time, and quite a few items in there that he told us there's been a lot of damage caused by tourists over the hundreds of years. But it's neat that you can still go in and do all this. Just quickly, this is one of the side buildings to the Abbey. It's the chapter house. It's just a very big, high-ceilinged octagonal building that also goes back about 1,000 years. When this was a monastery, this is where they all met, where all the monks met. It was a common room. And it was largely just walls of windows. I'd say 6 of the 8 sides were these big, tall windows. And this one, I think, is replaced. This was shattered during a bomb blast in World War II, and there is an inscription on that window that reads about how this is recreated after the war. And it gets something like the work of the artisans is their prayer, kind of a thing. It's really lovely, but the windows in here were pretty stunning. But this was where you sat, there was not too much comfort in those days. So leaving Westminster Abbey, we walked across the street to this famous building. Does it look familiar to anybody yet?
Somebody
Yep,
said
that's it. Parliament. This is the British Parliament, also known as Westminster Palace. I think what I didn't realize, this is sort of just another angle to it. Westminster Palace, this started out as a palace. In fact, this part of the building is where you enter. It's called the Great Hall, and it really is. This also dates back about 1,000 years. That part of the building only. That's just another close-up. It's of the tower on the other side. But so when you go in the Great Hall, this was part of the palace, was sort of just a large gathering space that was built 1,000 years ago, and the ceiling in here was amazing. To think that this is 1,000 years, this is a timbered ceiling. And this place survived a fire in the 1800s. This was the only thing that survived the fire, was this Great Hall. The timbered ceiling in here was really impressive to think. This was put up in the 1400s. So this is the kind of the entranceway, and still there's a lot of public gathering things that happen here in this Great Hall. This is the window at the other end of it. And this is the back entrance to the Houses of Parliament, which were only built in the 1800s, which I didn't realize. They look much older, it's the architecture and the detail there makes them look a lot older, but they're actually not that terribly old. This is St. Stephen's Chapel, which leads into the main hallway of the Houses of Parliament. It's filled with statues of important people in the government and old prime ministers. And look who we found here. I think I finally really understand who Walpole is. So this is Robert Walpole. And he has a statue in the St. Stephen's Chapel in the House of Parliament. And the reason was he's considered the first prime minister in the British government. He more or less invented the role of prime minister. He was the first resident of 10 Downing Street. And it was his sort of diplomatic approach to bridging the gap between the government and the monarch, the government of the people and the monarch. And he sort of devised a way to do that at the time. I think it was King Charles II. When nobody else sort of was able to bridge that gap. And so he jokingly became referred to as the Prime Minister. And that title stuck. And so it's, of course, the head of the British government today. And so
he is our
he's our
Robert
Robert
Walpole. He is why Walpole is named. Really?
Yeah, that's right. It's, and actually looking at a map of England is like looking at a map of Massachusetts because all the town names are the same. This is a picture in the House of Commons, the House of Lords, where we were not allowed to take pictures, but Jim did.
This is one I snuck because if you guys ever look over into our administration area, we use the same phones as the House of Lords does. So you're in good hands here. Okay. I sent that to Carrie while we were there. She didn't understand what I was sending.
So we were not. Yeah, so that's kind of the end of the House of Parliament tour for us because you were absolutely not allowed to take pictures there, and there was a lot of security guards there, an awful lot. The Parliament was not in session when we were there. But yeah, there was still, but amazingly, you can wander through all these and there's guided tours, and the House of Lords is amazing. Another gorgeous, gold and ornate and full of murals. It's really stunning.
This is, of course, equivalent to our House of Representatives and Senate.
Yeah.
So
that's where we got the idea.
that's where we got the idea, although they're closer together than the House and the Senate are.
So this was we coming out, and by the time we finished, this is a full day, this tour, and like that, we had to rush ourselves out of Westminster Abbey, and so it was dark by the time we came out. This was just some night shots of the courtyard at the palace, at the Houses of Parliament, and a night shot of Big Ben. And then at the end of the day, we went to a pub. We found a pub, the Lyceum Tavern, which was right by the Parliament buildings. This is sort of the bar. You get this idea that everything has a very nice old bar. These places are all old neighborhood establishments, and they still look it inside. And that was sort of the little booth where we got to eat. Everybody had a little private booth in there, sort of like a little train car almost.
Very warm and inviting.
Yes.
And you can tell by the previous slide. It just
We were seduced.
you feel comfortable walking in there.
And then I think I'll hand it back over to you.
My turn.
That was a full day, actually. That was a full day of touring.
Yeah, you should see my pedometer app on the phone. There were lots of steps per day. So, what is that? It is St. Paul's Cathedral, a very prominent center of London type of building. So we were certainly going to go there. And then we were doubly certain because many of you know Carol Fellini, who used to drive, in fact, she's still here on Wednesdays, told us we have to go to the St. Paul's and hear the Evensong. And so we made that a priority, and you'll see in a minute we did that. But that is one enormous structure, downtown London, also largely unscathed by the German bombings. If you can imagine that. I can't imagine that. I mean, I guess there was minor damage, but that's it. And, the rest of London is flattened, and that survives, so. I guess that's the front door. There's a Christmas tree up in the middle there. That's a very distorted picture. I was experimenting with photography. That's the dome that's straight up. And down at the bottom is straight ahead. So that's a stretched vision of the gorgeousness inside St. Paul's Church. But that's not all you get to do. You get to climb up to the Whispering Gallery, which is that ring, the large ring around the dome there. So to do that, you get into the bowels of the beast, and you walk where millions of others have walked over hundreds of years, I'm sure. Except that day you couldn't get out at the Whispering Gallery. You had to continue on. Believe it or not, you can go further up. So we're just passing through, just about making it. And since the laser pointer doesn't work on the TV, you are now headed for this balcony. I think it's called the Golden Balcony. We'll call it that for this purpose. And so up you go, up those stairs. In fact, there's some stairs that don't show. And then you're at this level. Yeah, you're way up above the city. There's the famous London Eye out there, the Ferris wheel. And the Shard. Joyce knows everything here. Yeah. So this is pretty cool. We're way up in the air. Yeah. It's called the London Eye. It's on the edge of the river.
Is that always there?
That's
That was a millennium thing.
yeah, it's permanent. It's permanent now. You can see the glistening Thames River in front there. So London is based basically on two sides of the river. The Thames is a huge feature in the city. So we walked around there and said, then we saw a sign that says, yeah, you can keep going up. You can go further. But when you do that, you're on a spiral staircase. And those people are coming up under our feet. We've gone up a spiral staircase onto a landing, up another spiral staircase. And now where are we, Mary Pat Happ? No, we are up there.
I gotta say, this was like one way. Then the signs kept saying one way, and I was like, I don't know if I want to keep going. But you didn't have much choice. Once you were in there, you kind of couldn't turn around. It was a different stairway to come down.
For cable, the question was there an elevator? There is not.
No,
There is not.
amazingly,
Either direction.
out up there. It's like being in the torch of the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah, so there you get and it's, I don't know what the diameter is. It's not tremendously big, but you're tremendously high. I think I figured out it's 300 feet above sea level. It's how many steps? 357
Something like that. Yeah.
steps from the ground up here. And now you can see the eye again and the Thames River. And my bald head. And,
Oh, that's looking the other way down the river.
right.
There's the Tower Bridge right there.
London is a sprawling city, I learned. It's a,
Everything's so close, though.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
here we go, panning down the Thames. We were lucky to have this weather on this day. You could see by Westminster pictures, it was drizzly and rainy for a lot of it, but on this day that we did this, it was great.
Yeah.
I think it gave someone a little vertigo, but I'm not sure of that. So, and they're very spare in their words. That's the way down. Yep. So you have to repeat the process down the spiral stairs and through the narrow halls. But we thought we'd show you what Evensong was, which is the real draw to get in there. Now this is going to take a second.
So while we were, you could tell that was, we were lucky to, and some things you just kind of happen on. We didn't realize that you could go all the way up there. Who would have thought? And So we had gone for Evensong, which starts at 5 o'clock. It's the evening prayer at the end of the day, and they do this every day. It's the choir that sings, and this is not the one we saw, but this is what it sounds like. So this is why we ended up all the way up there, kind of at dusk. We could see all the lights coming on in the city. That was really neat. And so the choir is composed of
The
young
warning cry
boys
forced my family
and
to flee.
adult
My
men.
sister, mother, and grandmother
And,
left their entire lives behind on February 24 and moved
the
in with
boys,
them
the St. Paul's actually runs a choir school, so those boys live there at the school and attend school, and so they sing every day.
I wish Carol Fellini was here. That was wonderful, Carol. Yeah. You may notice a theme here. We tried to have every meal at a different pub in London because that's at least one of us wanted to experience the pub scene. Yes, the question was, is the food good? The food was good, contrary to the old thought that London British food is not good. We had good food. I would say so. I ate fish and chips until I was sick of them. I was sick of them.
I never thought I'd hear him say, I don't want French fries.
Well, the Old Bell Tavern is right nearby St. Paul's, so it was perfect spot to go. And we got a cute, cozy little corner table. We're tucked into the corner of the pub, and it's kind of unique at a pub. I thought it was. You don't get table service. You go in, and the tables all have a number on them, and you order on your phone. Here's another reason you sort of need a phone. You order on your phone. The service you get is from the bartender that brings the stuff to you. They don't come and ask what you want. So it's a little different that way. You have to go to the bar if you weren't going to use the electronic version and order at the bar. And it works well. They expect you're going to do that. So tipping is a whole nother subject. We didn't know. You don't. We did, but you're not expected to. And on the bill, we noticed there was gratuity, a small gratuity built in. Yeah, very small. Oh yeah.
So that was one. Things were somebody mentioned that decorated for Christmas. All those pubs were really nicely homey decorations, and the other thing that was really neat about them is amazing how many of them had a fireplace in them, in the middle of the city, and they were burning wood, live fires. So no wonder London burned. Yeah. They're popular. It's popular places still, and plenty of them. So this was another day. This was a neat thing to do. This is actually a commuter boat. So think of the harbor ferry that we have here that goes out to Hingham, from Hingham to the center of town. So this was the Uber boat. It's their commuter boat that runs up and down the Thames River. And this is So this is the way we chose to go down to Greenwich, which is east of London. And it's technically a different, it's outside the city, but it's still within easy reach of the London commuter circle. So we got ourselves on the ferry in the morning, and we were riding down the river, enjoying the sights on either side of the river, and we came to the Tower Bridge and found it was open. In fact, we were in the process of something going through the bridge. So this was a big Dutch naval ship that had been docked in the river the day before, and it's getting pushed out here by a tug. And and you can see that we're looking through the ferry window, and it's not that clear, but it was just a neat thing to see that bridge. I always thought the whole thing went all the way up and all the way down. I didn't realize it actually opens like this. It's just basically a drawbridge. And so, so we got to see that coming down anyway. That was kind of neat. We had a lot of kind of neat happenstances. So that's a picture of the bridge when it ended up all the way down. We did. We went underneath. Yep. How do I get rid of the... Yes, you are right. We are headed to the Cutty Sark. And so this is down in Greenwich. This is actually not in the water. This is an enormous clipper ship. It's one of the clipper ships in the late 1800s that did the tea trade to China. I think it was like a 90-day voyage on this ship to go all the way around the bottom of Africa and around India and go to the tea ports in China to pick up the next year's fresh tea harvest. So this is actually, it kind of looks like it's sitting on the water. This is looking at it from the side where you go in, but in reality, this whole thing is supported on these struts, and you can go underneath it. So this is looking from the bottom all the way up to the top of the bow of the ship. And the whole ship is copper clad, and the reason for that was it prevented growth of barnacles and enabled the ship to move faster through the ocean. So there were a lot of features in the late 1800s that were built into this that were sort of designed for speed. So speed was a 90-day trip to China. And so this was from underneath the ship, and you actually go into the ship kind of in the middle here. It's a little bit crooked maybe. But this is a cross-section view. This was something they showed inside the ship. This is what it would look like when it was loaded with tea chests. And really, there was nothing terribly scientific about it. They just packed stones in the areas where there weren't wooden chests, and they just loaded. They had people inside here just dropping stuff down the hatch and people stowing things, and it just got packed full up. You couldn't move in there with chests of tea and stone in the spots where there was no tea. And so they kind of had this done up inside, like here's what it looked like on the floor. We're kind of in the belly of the thing at this point. It looked like it was loaded with tea chests. The interesting thing is there's actually now a little theater inside the boat there. It was really cool. Here you could sit in there, and they had stage shows. But coming back up top sides, this is looking towards the town of Greenwich, down the length of the ship. It's still all fully rigged, which is amazing. An amazing array of rope, and you can't imagine that people knew where all this went, and how to sail a ship like this, and also getting up these. All the way up when you're out at sea. A little frightening. But it was a gorgeous day. And so this is, as you can, it is right on the river. So you can see the river behind us, even though it's sitting on dry land. But yep, on the River Thames. This is Jim coming up we're going back to the captain's quarters in the boat, which was actually, when you look at the boat, the rest of the boat was pretty rough, except for the captain. So this was kind of neat. Nice state table, a fireplace back here, and these gimbaled to put your drinks, your tea or your whiskey or whatever they had. This is sort of also where they did a lot of the navigational planning, and you can see some of the charts out. There's the little fireplace. There were amazing. You wouldn't think. I mean, I guess you had to get heat somehow, but there were two live fireplaces on this big wooden ship. And think of that if that goes up in flames while you're out at sea. So the captain had one in his quarters, and the cook had one in the kitchen. And if you were on the crew of the boat, you kind of didn't get anything. You got wet, and it was a rough life. This is leaving the captain's quarters. And I think, here, I'll pass this off to Jim. The next place we went in Greenwich was right up the hill from here, and this is the National Observatory.
Yep, National Observatory in London, where time begins, right? Literally. Do you know why? Yeah, I heard it over there, Greenwich Mean Time. Well, this is Greenwich Mean Time. Exactly. This is up on a hill above the Cutty Sark and above the river, yep. And this was was built for the first royal astronomer, as I understand. It was important back then with all the Cutty Sark sailing and all of the other sailing ships. They had to navigate, and they didn't have constellation of satellites, GPS satellites. They had to use star sightings and accurate time. They had to know what time it was very accurately, and then take sextant sightings, if you will, on star angles. And navigating around this planet back then in the 1700s, 1600s, of course before that, was tough. So there seemed to be a knowledge they needed to have some way to tell time accurately, and it turns out that Greenwich won the battle to be designated the prime meridian, where zero is, zero longitude. I'm ahead of myself a little bit, but here's a balcony at that, looking down over a section of the city across the river, named what?
That's Cannery Wharf.
Cannery Wharf, right?
That's sort of the port of London, one of the ports of London. Where we were earlier was down here, further inland. This is looking
You see,
in there, yeah.
everything's based around the Thames River. You can see.
This is the ship where we were down. I don't know if you can tell. The masts are sticking up here, and then this is panned further to the right, and that's the old Naval College.
Did you go in?
That's a palace, just briefly. This is so tiny. Everything. I know.
That's called the Queen's Palace, right? It's
That's one of the Queen's house. Yeah.
Queen's
Queen
House.
Elizabeth I, I think.
Yeah.
house.
So for those who don't know, we have this prime meridian, 0 degrees longitude, which, as you see up there next to right above the E in Europe, passes right through Greenwich, England. So that we got a lot of education about how that happened, and it happened even though other countries and other entities were vying for it. It was a sort of a mark of importance if you were going to be designated where 0 was, because of course Eastern Hemisphere is to the east and we're in the Western Hemisphere. But boats, ships, captains needed an accurate time, so they needed to know you have to start measuring time from somewhere. So this observatory on the hill was manned by many royal astronomers over the years, and eventually, by taking multitudinous star sightings and times, etc., they determined that this line between her legs is the 0 degrees longitude, where we here in Massachusetts are about 72 degrees west longitude. So it all starts from somewhere. As somebody said, time starts from somewhere. We're 5 hours behind that. That's where time begins. Not literally, time never began or ends, right? But that's the human measurement of time starts there. And so I got to do it too. Half of me's in the east and half's in the west. And we're lucky. The two of us are very compatible. We love to stop and talk to people and take in any live discussion of anything we can get. And that fellow was wonderful. And basically, I've told you what he told me about and there's a lot more about the history of Greenwich Mean Time, etc.
Block development there, and creating star tables, maps to time.
Huge telescopes mapping star movement to the nth degree. Those people in the background are milling around the zero meridian there. That's where it actually is, right there. There were competing ideas in the past. That's Halley's meridian, the guy that discovered Halley's comet. He had a different idea where zero should be, and so he gets that little stick. Why don't you talk? You did the research.
This is an interesting little old, this is kind of a very pretty, I took the picture because I thought it was a very pretty weather vane with that big red sphere up there. This is way up on the top of the top spire of the astronomer's home, up on the hill there, which you can see, you could see the sweeping view of the river. You can imagine that you can see from the river all the way up here pretty easily, especially in the day when there wasn't too many buildings down by the river. And so this is actually more than just a weather vane, though. This is actually a time marker. This is like the ball at Times Square on New Year's. So they pull this up in the morning. It's got a little rope, and they pull it all the way up to the top in the morning, and at exactly 1 o'clock, they drop it. And the idea was all the ship's captains sitting on their ships out in the river before you would go set sail, and you want to synchronize your clocks, they watch the building, and as soon as that ball drops on the weather vane, it is exactly 1 o'clock. And so, and they blow their horns. I don't know if they had any to blow, but yep. And there was a schematic inside of all the pulleys and so forth that were used to have two people actually that could pull that ball up to the top and let it drop down at 1 o'clock. So I guess that's where our Times Square idea came from. That's the original ball dropping. Every day, they still do it in Greenwich every day.
Every day.
Yeah. We didn't see it. We were there too late in the day, but
At
yeah.
Flamsteed House, as you can see there. So being the pilot, ex-pilot perhaps, and navigator I had to pull out my phone and see if we were really at zero. And you can see there it says 0 degrees, 0 minutes, and 3 seconds west, down there below northwest there. So due to the fact that we now do have GPS satellites with atomic accuracy, and to some small degree to the fact that the plates of the Earth are moving, so Greenwich is moving, 0 degrees isn't really there anymore. But they still tout it to get the tourists to come and visit, right? So
He said navigational charts are
still based on it now, yes, yeah. Because the error isn't too great. You'll see that in a second. So I went to find as close as I could get to 0 meridian, and there I am at 1 second west there. And that is here, right through that trash can. And that path is sort of lined up on the sort of the true zero, if you will. So that's another comic relief section of the show. We didn't know about this, but at night, they have this green laser that shines out exactly down the 0 meridian just for effect. Yeah, so that's coming out lined up exactly with where time begins. It arcs out over the hill and by the red ball and down across the river. I don't know where its impact point is, but it's pretty striking. It was pretty striking at night. And that's just kind of an artsy shot. There's a planetarium as well there. Back down into the town of Greenwich, I couldn't help this one. Yeah, what does that mean? I sent this to Billy, the bus driver. It says Humped Pelican Crossing. I said, there can't be pelicans here. Humped is for the speed bump that's in the road, and pelican seems to be a term for pedestrians. so yeah, mind the gap there. Guess what we did later? You can see the Cutty Sark behind there. This is a pub, the Gypsy Moth, built right there on the Thames nearly. Wonderful, warm place. Very, very warm place. So that's where I realized you have to go to the bar to order your food. That was the first thing. And the Cutty Sark was done up at night. The one mast there was done as a Christmas tree. Yeah.
So we got to Greenwich on the ferry boat, right? So we went home on the ferry boat too. And we kind of did this on purpose because, so it turns out that this is a citywide art project. They call it an art project, the Illuminated River. And the idea is, they've been doing this over the years, is that all these bridges that cross the Thames River, this is the London Tower Bridge here, and then there's so many, there's over a dozen, right? All different places along the river. There's the Eye and the Houses of Parliament. And then we were up in Hammersmith area here. Every bridge is lit differently, so that the whole thing, if you travel the river at night, either on foot, because there are nice walkways along the banks of the river as well, but especially at night by boat, you can travel down the entire length of the river, and every bridge is lit, all neon lights. Every bridge has a different lighting scheme. And so you can't really get a picture of that. And in fact, we really didn't know what we were doing with our phones, or taking night pictures. Ours ended up looking like this, very fuzzy, and but it was really stunning. It was something that was a neat thing to do, and really just for the cost of the ride, there were a lot of things that were. It was amazing how many, and the buildings along the river too, that are a lot of them lit up in very colorful schemes. This is the Sea Containers building. That there's so many of the museums are free. And I said we would talk a little bit about public transportation, and this seemed like a good place to interject this. So we pretty much, I think once we took a cab, because we had a tight time schedule and we wanted to take one and say we'd done it. But they're expensive. And public transit was really something. The stations, the subways, the buses, we used the tube, and we used the buses a lot. A lot. And they were all clean. It always felt safe. It was absolutely amazing that they seem to know where every bus and every subway car is at any point in time, because if you go to the stops and the bus shelters, bus stops always had a shelter. And there would be a digital display there. When's the next train coming? And when's the one after that? You knew exactly how long you were going to wait.
When's the next bus coming?
When's the next bus? Or the tubes too. Yeah. All of them were. There's a little app you can install on your phone, and you don't even have to know how to go someplace. It knows where you are. It knows the location where you are on your phone. Or you can type a location in, and then you tell it where you want to go, type a location, and it tells you, well, you could take this bus and 3 stops, and then you change and get on that bus. All the bus stops are really clearly marked. Everything has like a letter on it. And when you get to the stop, every bus number that stops here is listed on the stop, including the night buses. I mean, you almost couldn't get lost. It was really something, for knowing nothing about it, and not being able to find a bus schedule anywhere, which is a different topic, but you really almost didn't need them, because this could tell you how to get from A to B. If you wanted to ride the subway, if you wanted to take the bus, this would take longer and you'd have to walk a little bit. But of course, riding the bus is a little cheaper than riding the subway, so you could usually pick from a couple options. It was really amazing. Bus stops, like I said, they're all well marked, and the bus, I don't think we waited 7 minutes. One time we waited 7 or 8 minutes for a bus at night.
Right.
Most other times it would be like 3. And so the other thing about using public transit too was we decided it was a great way to go sightseeing. So that trip up and down the river was just on the commuter boat, and the commuter boat was really nice. It had bathrooms, it had a bar, we had a snack bar. You could get a cocktail. I mean, it was like it was sort of like a tourist thing in and of itself, and it was just the commuter boat. We also we did all our Christmas light sightseeing from, there were private tours offered, but we just decided we'd ride the city bus. So I'll show you some pictures of that. This is sort of at this is the subway stations. Here's looking at the subway cars. Everything looks brand new. And this is, Jim we were kind of astounded that some of these subways, you could walk through the cars. So you didn't have to get stuck in one crowded car. You could walk the length of 6 subway cars. Yes, just once you got in the door. Most of the buses are still these double-decker buses. It's amazing. We wondered if we'd still see any, but they're still actually the norm. And this is the new style of bus. And you can see, like, if you come up top here, and you can we can sit anywhere you want, but this is like prime sightseeing viewing here. And often we could go, because we could get on kind of before we were in the middle of town, and we could sit right up front there, and it was just great view. This is just at a subway stop. I was just astounded at how good the maps and everything were. This is at our stop across the street, and there's a little map of the area if you wanted to walk around, and what different bus stops are there, and what letters they are, and all the different bus routes that go through there, and where they end up, and how often they go. And it was just really something. It was well done, and we ended up saying multiple times, why can't we have this in Boston? So we did do our Christmas light sightseeing here from the bus. So this was driving past Harrods department store, always done up very fancy in Christian Dior. Kind of looked very spectacular. Here you can see we're driving around. You can tell this is kind of being at the top of the bus. A lot of the streets in the shopping areas of town had incredible themed Christmas lights. Every street was a different sort of scheme of these, like, a lot of them were angels, or based on angels. Some of them were Christmas balls. They were just incredibly lit. It was just really gorgeous. I didn't take that picture, but we were on this street, and it really did look like this. It was really something. It was funny that there were so many Christmas lights in the streets like this, but when you walked around the neighborhoods, very few people had lights on their houses. Like a wreath would commonly be about what you would see. Very few lights, sometimes a Christmas tree in the window. But the city itself is very done up, and so it's really, it was a lot of fun to be there around Christmas. And so, speaking of Christmas, I'll hand this. This was our big Christmas experience that we treated ourselves to.
You guys tired? You want to go home? I see we're past time, but that's okay. Okay. Yes, thank you, Mary Pat. She got us tickets to the Royal Albert Hall. And the Royal Albert Hall is a premier music venue, if you will, performance venue in the city of London.
Sort of like our symphony hall.
Like Symphony Hall, but different. Built by Queen Victoria for her Prince Albert. Yes, so we would remember Prince Albert. So she got us tickets to a Christmas show, the Royal Carols and the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra with a guest singer, and very well done. So just to prove it, here I am. Door 6. Nice entrance, right? Yeah. Lots of people. The place was full, I would say. It's Queen Victoria in her own building, so to speak. And a shrine to her husband, Prince Albert, across the street. Where am I going? Oh, I'm in Joyce's way again. Sorry, Joyce. Yes, Queen Victoria and Prince Albert feature prominently here. That is enormous. You can tell by the people there across the street. So Mary Pat got us box seats. Box 36. This is about halfway up the available elevation. Places to hang your coats. It's like being at Fenway, right? And we did not order ahead, but you could have had a full bar set up there for yourself. Food, I guess. It's the top shelf stuff. This box system is repeated around this thing. You'll see in a second. Oh, yeah, she points out there's on the wall is umbrella holders. Classic British thing there, yeah. And you're right there. Yeah, you're right there. Oh, I was right there. Christmas at Royal Albert Hall. This is a grand place. Very, very lucky to be there at this time.
You have the impression it looks kind of circular, and it is. It's an absolute complete circle. It's completely round.
Like being at the Roman Colosseum.
This was shots that we took before the show started, so people are just coming in. But you can see there's actually like 3 levels of boxes.
With the red
besides
curtains.
seats. Yeah, with the red curtains. Some people brought their own Christmas lights and had them up in their box. It was obviously quite a family tradition kind of thing to do. And there's standing room. You can still buy standing room seats at the very top gallery there. You could stand for the show, and that's
Up
the
there.
ceiling.
No.
It was really spectacular. We hadn't seen anything like it.
Oh, I don't know, John. Yeah, thousands. Yeah, I don't know the capacity. We'll get back to you on that. So, Mary Pat and I both being musicians, this was kind of nirvana for us. This was great, right? A little bit of a close-up. Most of you know I'm a trumpet player. Those are herald trumpet players, the royal trumpet players. The trumpets are
red
4 feet
jackets.
long.
Yeah.
What's that?
In the red jackets.
In the red jackets there. If I had a brain, I would have taken a full video. But I didn't know I was going to do this show, so I didn't. We had good seats.
Well put together, you know.
What?
Well put together, all that, like that.
How many? 5,000.
5,272 people is the capacity. And that's amazing because the crowd control was really, it was pretty seamless.
But you don't. You don't.
Yeah.
There's the farthest point away. This
Yeah.
picture here is taken from afterwards, the farthest point from the stage. And really, this shrunk a little because of the wide angle lens, but
It was the,
it's way up high. Way up high. Guess what we did afterwards? I brought down. I didn't want to do it, but what? That's the Brady Pub. Oh, geez. Yeah, that's true. That's right in the vicinity. We sat behind this wall of windows right here on the left side. That's in the Kensington section of London. 1697, think of that. There's been a pub there since then. And the story is, from Kensington Palace, where the royals used to live in the past, there was a tunnel. And I guess the king got tired of being the king at times, and he'd go through the tunnel and pop up in the pub and have his libation unknown by the queen. That's what they told. That's the lore here at the Goat Tavern. Very nice. Very, very nice places to spend some time.
Yeah, we sat at a table right across from that fireplace. Again, like it was
Yeah.
just, everything was just so warm and cozy.
Right inside the front windows, you can see the light coming through there. A little bit out of sync, but we went to this one too, the Champion Pub. We were told to go there by a guide. I gotta get rid of this one. And as I think Mary Pat said, things just happened to us. So they said, go to this Champion Pub. It's a great place. It was hopping. It was World Cup soccer finals night. And that room there was filled with soccer fans. That's a TV up on the top.
That's the basement. We couldn't even get in.
Yeah,
upstairs.
that's the basement. We're in the basement. We're sitting at a table next to a bar in the basement, and soccer is everywhere in here. And we sat next to this sign. Just out of the blue, "We are the champions." Written in this very room by Freddie Mercury of Queen. Freddie was a local and regular here. He named the song after this pub. So some of you might know the rock band Queen, and a very famous song, "We Are the Champions." And I believe it because just to the left of this picture are pictures of the band in there. So you just run into stuff, and it was a lot of fun, just by chance. Like this, we just ran into this.
We got on the subway at Hammersmith one day, and this fella gets on with us with this big box. And the box had a couple, almost looked like a pet carrier maybe, but had some holes in it, but kind of tall. It was too tall to be a cat or a dog carrier. But I noticed that he was wearing a vest that said Falconer at work. I said to Jim, "That's a bird in the box." So, we were riding the subway, and I don't know whether what made me think to say something to him, but we said something to him, and here he chatted right up. There was a bird in the box. There is a hawk in the box, not a falcon. And he said, "Would you like to see her?" I'm like, "Are you kidding? You'd open that up?" And so he did. And there, I don't know if you can tell. Let's see if we can tell a little bit more. She's sitting there in the box on a perch. She is not tied in there, and she is not hooded because she rides the subway every day. So he works with the bird. This is their job. I joined his YouTube group, or his Instagram group. This is the bird. Her name is Jess. She's a Harris hawk, and they're hired different places around the city for him to go fly the hawk and scare off the pigeons. They are pigeon control. They were going to the Tower Bridge the day we saw them. You can see also, here's another picture of her. She's working a train station here. And there are videos, but they were hard to see anything. But he has posted videos of the hawk flying, and the pigeons just take right off, scatter in a huge swarm. So the idea is if the hawk keeps coming around, the pigeons get wary and they stay away and don't tend to roost in the train stations and the bridges and so forth. And so, yeah, he's out there working every day with this hawk, and he was very friendly, and very approachable. And so I followed him on Instagram, and it was just a neat story. I think the hawk is 7 years old. Yeah. So that was just another one of those things that happen, like Jim said. Well, here was another. We're getting very close to the end, actually, but here was another little thing that just happened.
Just wander around the city. This is a local church, St. James, right? St. James Church, and the musicians in us were drawn in, and there's a violin and a harpist there, and they're practicing for a recital they're going to do just for whoever wanders by. And just the two of them. Can you imagine? My phone is picking this up. The acoustics are tremendous. Being Christmas time, it was kind of moving just to wander in and find this type of thing. Yeah. Yours?
It sort of brings us to the end of the trip. Christmas Day. Christmas Day was our last day there. And so I thought it'd be fun to go around Christmas because there'd be all the decorations and so forth. But what I didn't think about was there is nothing open on Christmas. Really nothing. There is no public transportation. There is no place to go visit. There are no pubs unless you make a reservation for a full four-course English Christmas dinner. And we said, oh my gosh, we couldn't possibly do that at the end of the trip. So what we did do, we started the day by going to Mass. I always love to go to Mass, on Christmas especially. So we went to the local Catholic church, Holy Trinity. It was a beautiful church. We found a church that wasn't Anglican. And this is the church from the outside. The priest was in his very old-fashioned garments. He was actually an older fellow that was ordained older in life. He talked about his career in finance or something. Gave a great homily. Anyway, that was our start of Christmas Day. And then we decided to spend the afternoon riding bicycles. And actually, I should say, it was not really this green out. This was sort of a stock photo, but this is what the bicycle rack looks like. This is actually part of public transportation. They run, and this is in Boston too. There's a thing called Blue Bikes where you can just pick them up on the street and ride them and put them back at another location. They're all tracked and it's all done on your credit card. I will say though, one thing you can notice here is a sort of a palm frond. We were kind of surprised by how many tropical trees there are outdoors in London. They survive, palm trees and stuff. It's just, I guess, another indication that the climate is that much more moderate. So on Christmas Day, it was nice enough to go out bike riding. So we didn't take any pictures of us riding bikes, but
what makes that possible is that the buses don't run. And so the bus lanes are not occupied by buses, or else we'd have been killed.
It was frightening. I can't believe people
to think about riding
bikes
bicycles
on some of those
regular
streets.
days. But people do it all the time. But we had the bus lanes to ourselves, and it was a great thing to use them for.
We did. This was, you just get a close-up view of all the beautiful architecture. I don't have to. I mean, these are hard to appreciate really in pictures, but just that. So the buildings are just so gorgeous, as somebody else you were saying. They're so much not like things you see here. Here's another thing that's not like things you see here. It's the number of funny little old cars.
That's a Fiat 500 cc engine, it says on the back. My motorcycle is 1500 cc engine. So my bike is 3 of those.
I think this one's my fave. What was
Brand.
this, a Citroen?
Citroen. French.
This car had Dolly written on it. We think its name was Dolly, with a rollback roof.
Yeah, she's a convertible.
She had a few rust spots, but that was just a regular parking spot in Notting Hill. This was a little ice cream truck, a little Ford van. That's right, not like any you've seen here. This was not just an ice cream truck. I have to say, I went to all those pubs, and I don't think I had a British beer once, because every place had mulled wine, hot mulled wine. And this truck actually also sold hot mulled wine we saw in the window. But that was sort of something you don't see here, and it's delicious. It's just so warming. And there's another. What was that one?
That's a Morris Minor. It was near our hotel. It's an everyday driver. Someone drives that. Right.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Parking was really, and golly, driving, the roads were narrow. Those buses are actually much narrower buses than what we have in the street here. There were a few other, like, just right in our neighborhood, historical markers. This one says Gustav Holst, composer who lived from 1874 to 1934. This was on the wall of a school near us, St. Paul's School, wrote the planets and taught here. So that was one. Here was another one that was sort of right up the street. This is a picture. I did not take this picture right when we were there, but this is a fenced-in yard that's now a park, but used to be a fence around a big old school, St. Paul's, the old St. Paul's School, I guess. The plaque on this reads, "The Normandy landings were planned by General Montgomery and others in St. Paul's School, which occupied this site from 1884 to 1968. On 15th of May, 1944, the final invasion plan was presented to General Eisenhower and senior Allied commanders in the school lecture theater in the presence of King George VI and the Prime Minister, Winston Churchill. Right 2 blocks from our hotel. There was just history everywhere in London.
And then it was
well-marked.
bombed and obliterated.
Well, no, that was the church 2 doors down.
2 doors down,
Yeah,
right.
was bombed and obliterated. Yeah. So it was just fascinating. Yep. So then at the end of Christmas Day, the one thing that was open was the pub in our hotel. And here's that wonderful selection of gin that Jim was talking about. The pub was open because they have a restaurant and they had hosted Christmas dinner for £100 a person during the day, and so they let us have a drink, yeah, since they were open and the staff was there cleaning up. No. We had supermarket sandwiches for Christmas dinner. We didn't put that picture in here, but we stopped at the supermarket the day before because it really seemed like nothing was going to, and really, yeah, nothing was open. So it was worth planning ahead. So sadly, yeah, that was the end of the trip.
December
Off we
26th,
were to
we
the
hopped on that
airport.
one. That's a 777. See, they let me go.
They let him leave.
Yeah, we're boarding
26th
class
of
7,
December.
David. I know, David, up in Maine, you're listening again. Yes, boarding class 7. And here we are coming down the coast of Maine.
Yep, we really came home past Portland and Casco Bay and Brunswick and Bath, and back onto London Express, Braintree,
Logan.
Logan Express to Braintree, which of course is also a great bus service. Again, that was right there. So yeah, it was. So that was kind of, we're minding the gap.
And so there's your Mind the Gap tour of how Jim and Mary Pat did London. She wants to go over this with you a little bit.
This was this was the first time we had traveled anywhere, of course, in a few years because of COVID, and I'm sure, like everybody. So I thought, it's worth to, and, looking back on it, I said, there's really some things that are quite different. And so I thought it'd be worth to kind of let you in on, if you're thinking of traveling, what was different now. And so, well, the COVID vaccination thing, right? We did have to, the airline asked us our COVID vaccination status. We had to fill that out online before we could get our seat assignments coming home.
Right.
But that was it. I mean, we just said, yep, we're vaccinated. And they said, okay, we'll check. And a day later, we got a note saying, okay, you can get a seat. So I guess they checked someplace else, but there was no testing on either end. One thing that surprised me, there was no mask requirements anywhere we went. And I would say we were about the only people on the plane that wore a mask, because I don't want to get sick just when I'm going over there, but virtually nobody else had a mask on the plane. I was astounded. as I said earlier, we said that about the credit cards. One thing to me that was sort of different since I last traveled for work a couple years ago, and you had a cell phone, you couldn't always be sure it was going to work over there. You had to get a different SIM card. You had to go to the cell phone store. It was all. That's kind of a thing of the past, apparently. You know, we went and asked them at this store, and they said, "Nah, it just works." And sure enough, it just worked. You turn them back on when you get there, and it knew that you were in a different time zone, and it was really no big deal, which was a surprise to me, and a good thing, because as Jim mentioned earlier, boy, I don't know if it's just the way the world is going or whether it was COVID, but digitalization of everything has really accelerated. The whole customs entry in the UK was contactless. We did not see a person. We didn't talk to a person. You walk up to the gate, scan your passport when you get over there, and it takes a picture of you, and it thinks about you for a few seconds, and then the gate opens. And then we thought, okay, well, I guess we got to go find the next line. And before we knew it, we were out in the lobby, and we said, did we miss something? I don't think we're supposed to be here. We didn't even talk to anybody. Jim was so disappointed. We didn't get our passports stamped.
Yeah.
We have no proof that we were there. But it was completely automated customs entry. You hardly knew you were going anyplace different. It was really amazing. And coming home, their baggage check-in at Heathrow was the same way. You know, you can print your own boarding passes. That's been around for a while. But we actually also printed our own luggage tags. We tagged our own luggage and put it on the conveyor belt. They said, put your heaviest piece on first, and you put it up there, and it weighs it, and it prints you a ticket for it. Do you have another one? Yes or no? And it was really something. You know, there were plenty of agents around to help us, and everybody was very nice, but it was very automated. It was really something. Digital ticketing is kind of a thing now, of course. You know, you get your ticket on your cell phone, and you don't need paper. One thing that was a little different was that some of the places we bought tickets for wanted you to pick an entry time. And I think that probably was COVID related, where they're trying to space out the crowds. Like, you can't get a ticket to come at 9, you have to come at 9:30 where there's still room. So, but we didn't see too much of that. That really didn't hamper what we did, I would say. Of course, we were not in the high season either. Surprisingly, there were some businesses that were no cash, would not take cash as a payment. You had to use a card. Which I always figure they want cash because cards cost money. No, there were some places that, and I guess people are going that way more, cashless business. No paper tickets or cash on public transit. That's kind of a thing here too. You need your little Oyster card, as somebody mentioned, and you just load it with fare money and just use it. One thing that kind of surprised me and disappointed me, I like to pick up paper schedules and stuff. You could not find paper anything anymore. Paper brochures, paper booklets, train schedules, bus schedules. I found one subway schedule, and that was it. I mean, that stuff's all available online. And so if you're going to go, you almost, in retrospect, I need to print them before you go if you want paper, because in general, paper stuff is not handed out anymore. And I think that was a COVID change, you know. But the flip side is there's great travel apps like that. The London Transit had a great, here's how you find your bus. Here's when your bus is coming. There were some great ones for finding things to do. The London Pass had a good one. And so, yeah, it does just point to that you more and more almost need to travel with a phone, but
Or buy a t-shirt with a map on it.
or buy a t-shirt with the map. And then you just have to look at your travel partner's back. So, a lot of fun. Yep.
That's
that was
all we
our-
got, kids.
Appreciate that you all stayed through our long other people's vacation pictures.
Yeah, Mary Pat predicted we'd go long. We went long. So no charge, though.